Learned as part of the investigation is that on April 18th, before the first 911 call was received, there was an assault between the gunman and a person known to him. This assault occurred in the area of Portapique. The victim managed to escape from the gunman, and she hid overnight in the woods. Following this, police received its first 911 call with a report of a shooting at a home in the area. Officers arrived on scene at 10:26 in the evening, where they located a male who was leaving the area with an apparent gunshot wound. They learned that this male was shot while driving his vehicle, and the victim indicated that a vehicle had driven by him while he was driving, and that he was shot as the vehicle was passing by. He did describe this vehicle as a vehicle that looked like a police vehicle. He also indicated to the responding officers that that vehicle was driving towards the beach and that there was one way in and out of the community. And it's important to note that. The officer arranged for EHS, which is Emergency Health Services, to attend to the victim, and the victim was taken to hospital. He has survived. Several police units responded to the area, and upon arriving, they located several people who were deceased, some of which were lying in the roadway. There were also several structures that were already fully engulfed in flames. In total, there were over 7 locations where people were found deceased. Many of the deceased were discovered while responding members were checking homes for victims and or for suspects. At this time, the police began looking at a number of possible suspects as a result of the information that they were receiving. While the situation was unfolding, the critical incident program was engaged and was staging to take control of the critical incident. During this point, perimeters were established, specialized units responded, which included police dog services, emergency response team members, and requests for air support helicopter. There was also explosive disposal unit, crisis negotiators, and emergency medical response teams that were part of the critical incident package. Within a very short period of time, we also engaged specialized units and resources from a neighboring division in New Brunswick. Over their lengthy course of time, first responders engaged in clearing residences, searched for suspects, provided life-saving measures to victims. Telecommunication operators remained on the line with witnesses in the immediate area for extended periods of time. Fairly early into our involvement, we learned of a possible suspect and learned the individual lived in a home within that same community in Portapique. The possible suspect's home and garages, I can confirm, were fully engulfed in flames as well. 2 police package Ford vehicles, as well as a 3rd vehicle, was also burning on that potential suspect's property. We also learned that the gunman was in possession of a pistol and long-barreled weapons. We learned that he was also known to own several vehicles that looked like police vehicles. Our efforts to locate the suspect continued throughout the night. It was only after 6:30 in the morning or daybreak when a victim emerged from hiding after she had called 911. Our officers responded, and it was at that time that through that significant key witness, we confirmed more details about Gabriel Wortman. This included the fact that he was in possession of a fully marked and equipped replica RCMP vehicle and was wearing a police uniform. We also learned that he was in possession of several firearms that included pistols and long-barreled weapons. It was at that time that the police issued a BOLO, which is a be on the lookout for. That's a bulletin which included a description of the suspect and the vehicle to all police agencies in Nova Scotia. We maintained containment of the scene and continued to search for the suspect. So it was more than 12 hours after our initial arrival in the Portapique area that we began receiving a second series of 911 calls. That was in an area which was more than 60 kilometers away from the Portapique area. Our investigation has revealed that the gunman attended a residence on Hunter Road in the Glenholm area. At that location, the gunman killed 2 men and 1 woman. and he set the residence on fire. At least 2 of the victims were known to the gunman. Our investigation has uncovered that the gunman then traveled to a residence on Highway 4 in the Glenholm area. He had knocked on the door and he had woken the occupants. He was known to the residents, and they identified him to a 911 call taker. And they also advised that he was driving a police vehicle and carrying a long-barreled weapon. They did not answer the door, and the gunman left. The gunman continued southbound on Highway 4 from Glenholm to the Wentworth area. Along the way, he encountered a woman who was out walking, and he shot the woman at the roadside. He continued south towards DeBert. At that point, he encountered 2 other individuals who happened to be driving their vehicles at that time. A witness described that the suspect had pulled over one of the vehicles and had shot one of the drivers. He continued driving down that same road, Highway 4, and he encountered a second vehicle, and he shot and killed that victim at that location. During this second series of events, from the timing of the first call on Hunty Road to the last incident was about a distance of 44 kilometers. You can see on the map, unfortunately, that second 911 call is not on the screen. However, you can see some timings of the pinpoint of the map. The lower left corner, you can see the Portapique area. The first incident that we believe that the gunman had attended to was that pin at the top of the map, which is in the Wentworth area. That's where he killed the 2 males, the male and 2 males and 1 female. He then proceeded over to the Glenholm area, which is just to the left of that, where that 911 call came in, and he departed that residence. Shortly after that, 9:35, there was a 911 call for the female walker as the gunman proceeded down to the DeBert area by 10:08. So during that period of time, it was both Constable Chad Morrison and Constable Heidi Stevenson. They were on shift and working out of the RCMP Enfield detachment on the morning of April 19th. Both were communicating on their police radios with each other, and they had arranged to make a meet. Constable Morrison was waiting for Constable Stevenson at Highway 2 and Highway 224. What appeared to be a marked police vehicle then approached Constable Morrison. As they had prearranged to meet at that location, Constable Morrison thought that the vehicle was Constable Stevenson. The approaching police vehicle was actually driven by the gunman. The gunman pulled up beside Constable Morrison and immediately opened fire. Constable Morrison received several gunshot wounds, and he began to retreat from the area, driving his vehicle away from the scene. He notified other officers and dispatch that he had been shot and that he was en route to an EHS station for emergency medical attention. During that time, Constable Heidi Stevenson was nearby, believed to be driving northbound on Highway 2, while the gunman was traveling southbound on Highway 2 at that time. At that point, both vehicles collided head-on. Constable Stevenson engaged the gunman. The gunman took Constable Stevenson's life. He also took Constable Stevenson's issued sidearm and her magazines. A passerby had stopped and was fatally shot by the gunman. The gunman set both Constable Stevenson's vehicle and the replica police vehicle on fire. He left the scene driving south on Highway 224 in the passerby's vehicle, which was described as a silver SUV. The gunman traveled south on Highway 224 for a very short distance, where he entered the home on the east side of Highway 224. That home happened to be the home of a woman known to the gunman. The gunman shot and killed that female resident. The gunman then removed the police clothing that he was wearing at the time and transferred his weapons to the female victim's vehicle, which was a red Mazda 3. The gunman traveled south on Highway 224, coming to the big stop Irving in Enfield. While he was at the gas pumps, one of our tactical resources came to the gas station to refuel their vehicle. When the officer exited the vehicle, there was an encounter and the gunman was shot and killed by police at 11:26 in the morning. The distance that the gunman had traveled from the first shooting of Constable Morrison to the encounter with police at the Big Stop was approximately 23 kilometers. You can see on the map, the first pin is the area where Constable Morrison was parked just on the other side of the river, and he and Constable Stevenson had been communicating, and they were aware that we were looking for a suspect in a replica police vehicle. They had decided to meet, and it's not uncommon for police officers to meet when they drive in with their vehicles. And it was that replica vehicle that Constable Morrison initially believed to be Constable Stevenson, as they had previously arranged to meet at that location. Constable Morrison traveled north from that location, and when he was radioing to officers and dispatch, it was Constable Stevenson that was approaching the scene as well, as the suspect was fleeing towards her. You can see the distance that was traveled from those two scenes. The two officer-involved shootings are at that first point. The second shooting of the female victim, where there was the change of vehicles, was fairly close. And then the last point is at the Enfield Irving Big Stop, where the encounter occurred between the gunman and our officers.